Hi, I'm Peggy Farron, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. My guest today is Linford Morton, who is a friend of mine at this point. We've been friends for a few years now. He is going to talk about podcasting. He is on his second successful podcast, but not his second podcast. He had a couple of duds before he really learned the ins and outs. Why should you have a podcast as a photographer? Well, we're going to cover all of that in this episode of the Understand Photography Show. The Understand Photography Show is a podcast, and we also broadcast on Facebook and YouTube. The show is weekly, 4 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time or Eastern Time, depending on which one we're on. Every Friday, 4 o'clock every Friday, the show comes out. So we've been doing the show for almost 3 years. There's a lot of good content. Our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. So if you like things explained to you simply, step-by-step type of, learning, that's the kind of learning you like, you're going to like our show. And you're going to like our teaching in general. We do have we offer photography tours, and we offer training as well. Here in Naples, Florida, we have a training center, but we also have some online classes, and our signature class is called the 4 Weeks to Proficiency in Photography. The next class starts June 4th, so it's coming up very soon. If you're not shooting in the manual mode comfortably, you need to take this class, period. The first class, it's only 2 hours, and you're going to be shooting in manual. I'm not kidding you. It took me 2 years to learn to shoot in manual, and when I found out how easy it was, I was kind of mad. So I'm going to teach you in 2 hours. You're going to understand it, and then you're going to have homework. You're going to have homework every day that's going to help you seal that information. Once you start like seeing, I'm going to say, okay, take the orange or whatever with this setting, this setting, this setting. You're going to see the difference. You're going to start understanding the settings, and then the whole class builds from there. This class gives you a strong foundation in photography. Understandphotography.com is our website, and click on something for freebies there, and you'll have to put in your email address, and then I send a newsletter out once a month. You'll be on our newsletter list. So Linford Morton, he goes by Linford Morton. He is a successful photographer. He's been a photographer and a marketing person for many, many years. When I met him because I was on his show, which was called Shutterbug Life. He then took a job with Canon, and he worked there for a few years. He just left Canon and is coming back into the marketing world and teaching photography. He has a new podcast called the EOS Photographer, who he kind of specializes in Canon, teaching Canon photography, for Canon users. Welcome, Lynn.
Hi, Peggy. How are you? So glad to be with you.
Now I gave a little introduction about you, but let's just talk about you and podcasting, because our topic is podcasting. Now, you had a podcast in the past. That's how I met you, because I was a guest on your podcast.
That's correct. Well, I've been interested in podcasting for a long time. And, sorry to say, I had about 2 or 3 attempts that I started podcasting, and I just abandoned the show. And I saw this recently when I logged on to Apple iTunes, and they kept a record of every podcast I tried. But the last one I did, Shutterbug Life, that one really clicked. And I think I got it right then. We did about 101 episodes before I decided to leave and go work full-time for Canon USA. But that one, I think, was it was one of the best things I did for my business. It was a very rewarding experience.
Okay, so let's talk about and now wait. Now you're starting a new podcast.
I am. Since leaving Canon, I started a new one, EOS Photographer, which is, before I taught photography, and one of the things I struggled with, I wanted to know what kind of niche could I develop. And coming from Canon and with all that experience, I decided to sort of blend that into my photography podcast as a niche of sorts. And so I'm teaching photography, but it allows me to go deep on that platform, on that camera manufacturer's platform while I'm teaching. So that's the benefit there.
I think that's a great idea. And I think that's going to come up in your advice about finding your niche. You say niche, I say niche.
That's right. Tomato, tomato.
All right. So now you teach photography. I teach photography. I can see why we would want a podcast. But what about photographers who don't want to teach photography? Why would they want a podcast?
Well, I think a podcast, if you want to think about it in terms of now building a business and marketing your services, a podcast can be what you would call a content marketing approach to marketing your business. So in this approach, you use this with blogs or with YouTube channels or with any other format. The thought is you use this platform to entertain, to educate, to give back to your ideal clients so that you can build this know, like, and trust with them. So photographers can do the same thing. If you are a photographer, for instance, and you are, let's say, working with families and you want to photograph more moms and their kids, you can create a podcast that speaks just to them and their issues. And then the people who you would want to work with as your ideal clients now find this and they start following you and they said, hey, this is cool. I like what this person is doing. Same thing if you were working with galleries. You think, okay, what does the gallery owner need to what do they need? What problem can I solve for them? Maybe you bring on other artists and expose them to potential people to display in their gallery. Maybe you bring on people who talk about how they can run their galleries more efficiently. I mean, you would find a focus area that solves a problem for this potential customer of yours. And even for photographers, you can make that work. And the cool thing about that is now when you want to go and, let's say, sell your paint, your art or a session or whatever you're selling, they already know you and they already have a relationship with you. So you'll find that the selling process, you overcome that hurdle that you typically have to go through when there's that resistance because, oh, I don't know about this person, they're trying to sell me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Well, it's building, what did you say? Know, like, trust. They get
know,
to know
like,
you.
And trust.
They get to like you. They get to trust you.
And that's the path you want to take any customer down, regardless of whether or not you're doing a podcast. When you go and you sit with them and you pitch someone to be a potential client, they know who you are. Then it's, do I like this person? Then do I trust that they can deliver and do what they say they will? And I think a podcast is one way for you to build that kind of a relationship. So at the end of, listening to you and having you in the air for 30 to 45 minutes for each week, I think this person is trustworthy. I have found that in my business, even as an educator, if I can talk about the education side for a minute, because I think it will make sense to someone who is also teaching, it's the same principle. So when I used to, I would take photographers back to New Orleans. This is where I'm from. And I sort of one thing I like to do every spring, take a group of photographers back there. And when I first started doing this is almost 10 years ago now, because it's a high ticket item, when someone wanted to buy, they'd want to talk to me. So I would schedule a phone call, we would talk, and I would answer all the questions they had. And then, okay, good, they go off and buy. And so this was a process I was doing and it was working and I was, okay, this is fine. And then I started my podcast and I noticed that the calls stopped coming. People were just buying without needing to talk to me. So, naturally you call one of them up and go, okay, wait a minute. How did you find out about this? And why did you decide to buy? Oh, I listen to your podcast every week and I love what you do. I can't wait to go and spend some time with you.
That's awesome.
So now that hurdle that I always struggle to overcome with building trust and can they trust this guy with, multiple $1,000s of my money, no longer an issue for them because they felt like they knew me.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So get us started. So say I'm a fine art photographer and I'm gonna first decide on my customer, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, your audience or your well, so right. So the first thing I'm a lifelong communicator, and they always told us, the first rule of communication is know your audience, right?
Okay.
So you have to know who you're talking to, and it should be easy because you want to think about who that ideal customer is, right? Who is it? Is it a gallery owner? Is it someone who buys art and collects on their own? Is it someone, other art? Like, who is it that you want to reach? If you think to yourself, if I could sell more to this kind of person, that would be like the best thing ever. And then that's your audience, and then you think about, okay, what problem can I solve for them? How can I help them in some way? Because you're going to have to come to this with a service mindset, right? So how can I help this person? And it helps to think about them as a singular person. So think of that one person that you know who represents that ideal customer. Okay, let's call her Sue. Okay, great. What does Sue really want? And you start thinking about, what her day is like and what she thinks about and where her challenges might be. And you fashion your podcast around those, kinds of issues so that she will want to now tune in and say, hey, I like what, this person is doing because they answer questions that are important to me. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
So let's say I am a fine art photographer and I'm going to target the galleries. So I would just kind of first maybe have a brainstorming session and just write down ideas of what I
Mm-hmm.
think the customer, well, first I identify the customer, then I would try to identify her needs and her problems, and
Right.
then maybe
So
research to see like problems gallery owners face, maybe, I don't know.
you can do that. I just did that 5 minutes ago after we talked and found, just two or three things that they're struggling with in terms of running their galleries efficiently, profit margins being an issue. You can find that. But here's what I tend to do because I interact with my clients all the time. When they ask me questions, I sort of file them away. And if I hear the same question two or three times, I think there's a potential topic that for me to talk about. Because if they're
Ah,
wondering it, then perhaps others are as well. So
yeah.
when I'm out and I'm working with my clients, if I hear the same question over and over again, I say, you know what? I'm going to talk about that on my next podcast. So you tune in and listen for that. And they go, oh, cool. And I won't give your name, but I am going to speak directly to you on the next podcast. And some people like that.
Well, yeah, well, because you're including them. And of course, then they're, of course, going to listen to the podcast.
It's
Maybe
what we
even have
want.
some friends, listen, that's awesome. All right,
Yeah.
so I've got my customer in mind, and I've got a list of the problems that I think I can somehow solve. How do I decide
Or
on a
help. Yeah.
format? Like, am I going to interview people, or am I just going to talk, or?
You have to think about where you're most comfortable, right? So there are four formats usually. You have a topic based, where you just come up with a topic that you think is interesting or helpful for them, and you just you list out three to five points that you'll talk about, and you'll help them through. And what you're trying to find is how do I get them to some sort of transformation? Okay, good. So that's a topic based, and then there's the interview based, and this is one sort of like you and I are doing right now. You find other people who are who might be interesting or helpful, and then you bring them on and interview them. Now, this is good because you now can bring in all kinds of people who they also know, like, and trust and respect, and get the credibility. So they call it credibility transference when I was a communicator. Because
Okay.
I'm working with this person, their credibility is somehow transferred to me as well in the mind of my viewer. And so if I interview enough of these people, I sort of move up in status. If you think about John Lee Dumas, who does the Entrepreneur on Fire podcast, all he does is interview famous entrepreneurs. Now, this was a guy who had just got out of the Army as an Army captain. I don't know that he had much business experience before that, but now, people are searching him out to give all kinds of advice. So that's how that sort of transference occurs. So you have the topic-based, you can do interview-based, you can also do a variety or a mixture. You can do a Q&A format. I've seen some podcasters do the whole show is just answering questions. So there was a guy named Marcus Sheridan down in Virginia, and he had a pool business, and he was almost going out of business. He couldn't sell any more pools. And he created a podcast where all he did was answer people's questions. He said, I'm going to answer every question anybody ever asks of me. And he turned his business around just doing that, just answering questions. And then there's the variety format where you have, a mixture of these, like some Q&A, some interview, and maybe some topic-based. So you can mix them up as if you want.
And would you say the interview one is the easiest one?
Probably because let's say your topic is now being driven by that person's expertise, right? So you don't have to, when I'm doing a topic based, I have to go and think about a topic and think about, okay, what do I want to teach? And I'm teaching a whole class basically. So the prep time is a lot more involved than if I was just doing an interview. I like those because I think, okay, I'm interviewing Peggy Farron. So I just have to figure out what do I want to ask Peggy Farron and let Peggy shine. And then I've got a great show from it. And so I think that works well. It's easier to, I think, prep. And now when you do an interview, you've got to get good stuff out of people. So you've got to work on your interview skills, making people feel comfortable, and then giving them the kinds of questions where they can, give you helpful information for your audience.
Yeah, because I've been doing this almost 3 years. I can't believe it.
I know.
And I think I've gotten better as an interviewer, but also I have had a few people that they were just not good guests. They answer like, yep. And you'd go, oh my gosh, now.
Exactly. Now what? I've got a tap dance. Yeah, I've been there too. Oh,
well, the nice thing about, this show was live for my first 100 episodes. And then
God bless you for doing that.
Yeah, well, it's much easier. I've just scrapped interviews now because I recorded them. I didn't think they were good enough. And so I just threw them away. And I feel bad for the guest, but.
Yeah, I hope this one makes it.
All right. So we've got our audience. We've got kind of some loose topics that we want, because that's what I do that all the time. Poor Heather, now I've got somebody who actually helps me with the show to do, she helps me find guests. I used to find all the guests myself and come up with the questions myself. Now Heather does that. But I still have to say, hey, I want, and I can't find anybody. I want a show on things to do with a GoPro that are cool. And I found one guy but he had the same old stuff. I want somebody who knows some cool things with a GoPro. Wouldn't that be a good topic?
Yeah, it would actually.
But I'll do that. I'll keep coming up with topics. I give them to her and I say, find a guest who can answer this question.
Yeah.
So
I saw someone shoot a wedding with a GoPro once, and I thought that was cool.
Wow.
She was walking around just moving a lot too. So more than a typical videographer would, who lock a video down maybe. She was weaving in between the crowd and just, it looked like it should be a very fun video.
Wow.
So I don't know.
I don't know either. I still haven't found that right guest.
Right, exactly.
All right, so we've got an idea what we're going to do. We've got the format. Let's say we're going to do the interview format, because I really do think it's the easier one. I mean, just if you, like you said, all that research is really hard. And how often do you need to put this out? I mean, I put mine out every week. It's a lot of work.
It all depends on how you structure your podcast, right? It can be a lot of work, yes. Um, and you're doing a live video show, so the production, I think a lot more issues are involved there. So if you're just doing an audio podcast, for instance, you could do it as bare bones as talking into your iPhone. There's an app, I think, called Boss Jock that will record a podcast for you. You can do it live. You can load your intro and outro into carts, and then do the whole thing straight from your. I did a remote episode that way once, and it worked pretty good. And then you export it, and you're done. So
Wow.
there are ways to do this and keep it very simple and bare bones, but you have to think about, okay, what brand do I want to have on my podcast? You want to be polished, or you want to just be loose. Jenna Martin, I was listening to her podcast, and while she's talking, her daughter comes down from taking a nap and starts talking to her. She left it in. Now, I would have been pause, stop, re-record, do it over, but she just left it in. Hi, mommy's recording now. Go back upstairs to sleep, and it worked for her
Well,
because
her
that's
audience is
for her
her
audience.
audience
It was sort of an
is young
authentic
moms.
approach, right?
Yeah.
It was authentic for her. So you have to think about what kind of brand you want to have too.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So is there, and this, I didn't give you this question ahead of time, sorry.
It's
But like
okay.
for me, who does the video, do you think I think you're right. It's easier if you just do a podcast. I definitely have more listeners than I have viewers on YouTube and Facebook. Is there any benefit to doing what I do where I put it out on Facebook and YouTube as a video? Because like right now using GoToMeeting. It costs $50 a month just for GoToMeeting. I mean, you could do it on
Right,
Skype, I guess. I think it might be free. I don't know. I already had GoToMeeting for other parts of my business. So,
right.
um, is there,
So
do you think
if
that
you
it matters? It really matters. What's most important?
I think what's most important is you have a clear and compelling message that people are interested in, and they'll listen, they'll tune in to listen or to watch. Um, there are pros and cons. It's like you teach photography. The answer to every question is it depends.
Depends. I know.
So it depends. If I was listening to Mari Smith, who is the queen of Facebook, as she calls herself, and knows everything about Facebook marketing. And in one of her pitches, and a few other people, they're saying video is the way to go now. The folks like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, they're rewarding video more so than any other format. And so if you have a show in video, you can take advantage of that. So if you go live on Facebook, if you go on YouTube, if wherever you're showing video, people are now starting to favor that. So, that's the good thing, right? But there's work involved in it. Like you said, you can go audio only and then maybe do shorter videos to promote it. I mean, there are ways to work around that. And you have to think where you're most comfortable. Are you comfortable in front of the camera? That factors in too. Are you more comfortable just talking? Like, how are you most comfortable communicating? That should probably guide which way you go more so than anything else.
That's such a good point because this is the hardest thing for me because I'm very comfortable interviewing somebody face to face. Right now, I
Right,
have to look at the webcam rather than you,
right, right.
and it's very unsettling to
Well,
just look at a webcam and I can't look at you, I can't look at myself, I can't
I know I'm doing the
and I
same
feel
thing.
like
It's kind of
I'm not flowing as much as I do when I'm live with a person.
right. You don't get that feedback. And I say it depends on where you're comfortable. I had a client once when I was doing PR, and I would sit and talk with her about, okay, we're gonna get these messages out. She wanted to build up her brand, and she would tell these stories about her clients and her business, and they were just so compelling. And I said, we've got to get you on video and let people see and hear this. And she said, okay. I put the camera in front of her, and boom, she became a different person. She just became wooden, and it was awful. And I thought to myself, well, this format clearly is not for her, even though
Yeah.
she in one-on-one, she's just so engaging. So
Yeah.
you have to
It's
know.
much easier for me to either talk on the phone or I know even FaceTime. My son, moved away, which makes me sad, but he tried to FaceTime me a few times. I said, this is hard. Can't we just talk on the phone so I can like do the dishes and, whatever?
Yeah.
But
So,
oh well.
so my podcast is audio only, and I chose that format because I didn't want to go through the hassle for me of video. I wanted to be able to do it all by myself if I needed to. I didn't want to have a camera person and an audio person and maybe an assistant and all the things that go into doing a really good video production. I thought, I if I have to do all that, I won't do it as often as I need to.
Oh, so
I'm
that
gonna,
was my question. I totally forgot about my original question was how often do we need to put it out?
yeah. I would say weekly at a minimum if just to get some traction. I think more important than how often is be consistent. If it's going to be every 2 weeks, then by God, every 2 weeks you better be broadcasting because what you're doing is training the audience to come and look for you at a certain time. So we know at Friday at 4 p.m. Peggy is live, and we know to go and look for her at that time. And if I show up at Friday at 4 p.m. and there's no Peggy, then I'm like, hey, what's going on? Maybe she's not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
If she says I'm here on the 1st and 15th, then it's every 2 weeks, but I still know when to look forward to it. I think, the more frequent you are, the more traction you can start to build. But more than frequency, I would look for consistency.
Okay. Okay, so I know I'm going to do it. Let's just say I'm going to start easy and go every other week. I got my
Hmm.
audience in mind. I have like some topics in mind. Let's say I'm going to
Hmm.
interview. I have the guests. Technically, now what I did, because I struggle with technology, I hired
Hmm.
I hired someone to help me. Now
Sure.
that's now that was because we were doing a live show and all that other, but I
Right,
always
right.
I always overcomplicate things. I mean, I'm good at simplifying to teach someone else, but for myself, for some reason, I make it hard on myself. Anyway, but I want to start simple. I just want a podcast. Okay, what do I need a good mic. That's one thing that since we started recording, doing these remote interviews, I've had to scrap several interviews because people don't have good microphones.
Right.
So that's the most important thing, would you say?
It is because even on video, and you know this, even on video, if your audio is bad, people will turn it off, even though video you think is the primary mode people are using to communicate with you. If the audio is bad, people click out. So you have to have a good microphone. And like anything else, it depends. You have a range of different levels of microphone that you can use. I think the best value for the money is an Audio Technica. Let me read it. Audio Technica ATR 2100 USB mic. It's about 69, 70 bucks. You can get it on Amazon and just about anywhere they sell electronics.
And we'll put
And
a link in the show notes, by the way.
yeah, I'll put a sure. And this microphone is great. I used that one for a while on my podcast, and it was better than microphones that I bought for twice as much money. So
Ah,
this one is good. You can, it's USB, or you can have what's called the XLR, which is the big the mic cable you see for like the bands use. But you can get just a USB, plug it directly into your computer, and record with that. So that's a great, I think, bang for your buck kind of microphone. Now, if you want to scale up, you can get, so at the top end, you see a lot of podcasters talking about the Heil PR40 as a great, professional radio quality sounding microphone. Um, I like the Shure SM7B. These are about $300 in that, between $300 to $400 in that range. to get a professional microphone if you want to have that really Barry White sound to your voice. Well, for males anyway.
That deep zone.
That's right. That's right.
So, but we'll put, if you will send me those, I'll put the links in
Of
the show
course.
notes. But the microphone is really important. You have to have a good mic.
You
Even if
do.
it's a
You do.
$70 one, $70 is not a big investment to start something
It's
important.
not. And when you think about it, that's really the main investment you have for starting a podcast is getting a great microphone. Because when you think about it, you can get software you didn't ask yet, but you can use software to edit it for free. And then you can export it. And really all you then pay for is for someone to host your show so that you can distribute it to different, like Apple Podcast and a lot of the other distribution channels. But really, a microphone is the only thing you really need to buy. There are
Okay,
lots of
so
other
you
things you
bought,
can buy, but
yeah.
that's microphone is what you need to buy.
And one thing I learned just from doing these remote interviews, because I haven't been doing these very long, but I had a speaker and I was getting feedback. So now I just wear cheap earbuds that I got from the airplane for free. I didn't even pay for them. They're just
Right,
cheap,
right,
but that way I don't get feedback.
right, right.
So
You
that
also,
was something.
and right, if you're doing an interview, you do it's well. It's always helpful to have to get feedback. I've got like 3 or 4 different kinds of headphones here that I that I use when I'm recording. And as a matter of fact, cautionary note: I was recording yesterday for my weekly podcast, and I decided I don't need the headphones. Won't monitor it. And I found halfway through there was some feedback that I would have heard if I had the headphones on, and I could have stopped and fixed it, but I didn't. And there you go. I'll never do that again.
Yeah, keep those
Learn
headphones
from
on.
my mistake.
Okay, so what is the software to edit it?
So you can, if you are a Mac user, your Mac comes with something called GarageBand, and it's an audio editing software that you can use for bands and music, but it's great for podcasts. And so you can, record straight into it. You can take audio into it and then edit there. And it's easy to to make edits and pull things out, chop it up so that you can get your ums and ahs out if you want to. Very easy to do. So GarageBand comes with every Mac. That's free if you're an Apple user. If
Okay.
you're not, another free one is called Audacity. And Audacity is an open source software that you can download, and I think it works on just about every platform. And that one, again, but most of them you'll find will have similar structures. You can record on tracks, meaning I have one track, for instance, where I have all my narrations and talking. And if I want music, I can put another track so that it can play at the same time. So Audacity is another one that is free. If you want to take it up a notch in the Adobe Creative Cloud, there's also one. And I'm blanking out on it now. It's called Adobe Audition. Sorry.
Okay.
Adobe
I was gonna say,
Audition.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those you can get in your Creative Cloud subscription, and then you can really go in, and that's a professional audio editing software that you can use.
Okay, but you don't need it. We can get the free ones.
You get the free one, and it works just fine. So I would suggest go with either GarageBand or Audacity.
Okay.
So if you're doing interviews, you want to use a platform that allows you to record each person on a separate track. Because if you don't, let's say you're talking with someone and their audio is lower than yours, you're going to want to be able to level them up at some point. And so Skype has an add-on called Ecamm that you would use with it, and it allows you then to record both sides individually. And then
is that
go
free,
ahead.
or does that cost money?
It's a one-time purchase, I think, like $20 or something like that. And then once you have it, then it's free. Now, Zencaster, you would buy as a subscription, and that will also, lets you record both. What I like about Zencaster is all you'll do is, say I'm starting a new show, and it gives you a link to send to your guest. And all your guest has to do is click on that link, and they're right into the portal. You can see them, and you can record the whole show there.
Do you know how much it costs?
I think there is a $20 a month subscription for that one, and then there's a higher level for professionals. I think it's about $80 a month. But for 20 and then there's a free level. I think I don't know. I think they limit how many recordings you get for it.
Okay, all right. This is so helpful.
Now, let's say I'll throw out another resource for you. Let's say you are recording and it's just you and you're listening to it and you're talking and maybe you moved away from the mic back and forth and you hear the volume going up and down. There is a service called Auphonic, Auphonic. And Auphonic has what's called a leveling service, and it's really cool. When you're done with your interview, you upload it there and it goes through and it makes everything the perfect level. And if there are maybe a guy is mowing the lawn in the backyard and he's a really low sound. I know you can't relate to that, but
he's teasing me because I had to stop the podcast because my lawn guy came. Go ahead.
But let's say that happens, right? You go to Auphonic and it also pulls out those low level sounds that can be distracting. So it's a good service to have. They give you 2 free hours per month, and beyond that, you buy credits for more than that. But it's pretty reasonable.
I probably, in the reviews on iTunes and the podcast reviews, I get good reviews. On Facebook, people say nice things. On YouTube, that's where the haters live.
Oh, yeah, the trolls live on YouTube.
Yeah, I get a lot of really nasty comments, but mostly about my laugh. I get really nasty comments about my laugh, but I didn't know I didn't know that I could tune it down by that service. I should look into that since people hate my laugh.
And some of that you just have to let it go and go, well, that person, who cares what they think? They're never working with me anyway.
Oh, they're really mean. And I just, most of the time, if it's not super mean, I leave it in there. But if people are just mean, there's just, no point to their meanness.
None. So all right. I would turn all that stuff off. And it's funny because, for different people, the same thing will strike you a different way. For instance, I used to work with a business coach who got the same thing. He would do these videos and he was over the top, happy and laughing and giggling. And you would see people writing in their thing, oh, this guy is just annoying. And I thought, I think he's quirky. I like him. And, I gave him money. So it didn't bother me that much.
Yeah, I think that's true. I know well, you can certainly recognize me from my laugh anyway. So
there you go.
I'm not a young woman. I don't think I can change it at this point.
Nor should you.
Did you hear me tune it down that time though? Okay, so all right. So I feel like technically you've really covered. Is there anything else technically that we need to know? I mean, you've really covered a lot.
So that gets you through recording and editing. And once you've done that, you then want to do what's called an ID3 tag. And this is you embed in the file information about you, your show, and a number of other things. And there's a software that will allow you to open it up and embed that so that it can be read from iTunes and all the other services where you're sending it out. So that's one other thing you need to do. I'll send you a link for that so that you can share it with your audience. And then finally, the only thing you need is a host, someone to host the files, because Apple iTunes is not going to host the file for you. You're basically going to find someone to to hold it there like almost like a blog provider would do, and then
Okay.
they'll give you what's called the RSS feed, and that tells Apple iTunes where to go to look for the next episode. So whenever you publish a new episode, it sends out this ping on the RSS feed. Apple goes down, grabs it, brings it back, and then pushes it out. And so you want to find someone to host it for you. One company called Libsyn, Libsyn, is a very good one. They're used a lot, and they have different tiers. You can get for as low as $5 a month up to, when I was researching this for, when I was working for Canon, they were going to charge us because we were a brand $100 a month for what I paid $5 for on my own. If you want stats with it, then they tack another $15 on it. So Libsyn is one. Buzzsprout is another one. Buzz, sprout, like a plant. I found them. I used Libsyn for my first podcast. I used Buzzsprout for the one I'm doing now, and I found Buzzsprout to be a much simpler and easier interface.
Okay.
And so it's about the same. And they have built into their platform an automatic way for you to send it to Apple, send it to Stitcher, send it to all the other distribution channels. They're just little buttons that you click and say, send it now so I can listen to it on my Alexa. And I hit a button and there it is. So, they're good for that as well.
I use SoundCloud, and that's what they do too. They just send it out to everybody. I upload only once to SoundCloud, and they send it out to iTunes and Stitcher and all that other stuff. I don't even have to click anything else. I just upload it to them. I think it was set up for me. Again, I paid somebody.
Right.
So she probably set it up that way in the beginning, but it's been really easy, which I like.
Yeah. Once it's set up, then you just upload the file and your description, and you hit publish, and boom, there it is for the world. It's really simple.
Okay, so anything else technically that we need to know?
No, I think that should cover it. We've covered recording it, editing it, and then publishing it, and really those are the three main steps. Okay,
so now I need to get a name for my podcast. What do I mean, how, this is something that, Joe Fitzpatrick works here, and he and I go through this all the time because he wants to have really clever titles to things, and I want really clear, in-your-face titles. And since it's my company, I always win. But he did a whole class called Taming Lightroom, and it says Taming Lightroom throughout the whole class. And I said, I don't like that name. And we had this big, power struggle over it because my name is probably too long, but I renamed it Understanding Lightroom because we already have a basic Lightroom class. So this one I renamed it to Understanding Lightroom Catalogs, Collections. What else? I forget. There are 4 parts to it.
Right.
Because then it says what it is. To me, Taming Lightroom was like, what does that mean? Right.
And it's vague, and specificity when you're marketing is really going to be your friend. And lots of times, we have the urge to be clever and punny and wordplay and use wordplay and all those kinds of things. At the end of the day, I just want to know what it is and what it was going to do for me. And the easier it is for me to figure that out from your title, probably the more success you will have. My little sister, who's also a marketing person, says you can have clever names if you have a lot of money to advertise and market to educate people to what that means. But if you don't plan on educating folks as to what something like Amazon really means, then you probably ought to give a name that will just tell people right away what that is.
Yeah. So and is there a way, like, how things are trademarked, or do you need to do all of that? I guess you should research to see if somebody else has the exact same name first.
You should, and and you can research a trademark and online for free, and well, I think it was free the last time I checked, or just have someone do a search for you. And 9 times out of 10, it's not going to be a problem. Except the time it is, it becomes a real problem. I had a client who launched a blog, chose a name that really fit her brand, and was using it for a little more than a year, and got a demand letter from someone that said, "You're now infringing on my trademark." And it was really a dubious claim, but she was able to extract money out of her as a result of it. So, sometimes a little caution might be helpful. I just had someone run a search for me just to make sure that I was in the clear, because I rather just have the peace of mind. But it all depends on how how much money you how you want to. Is this a hobby for you, or are you trying to build a 6-figure business out of this podcast? Because if you make enough money, they'll find you. Right? Because once the podcast, if you're not making any money, they might not bother. But once they figure you're making money, then they show up. So, depends on where you want to take it, how much due diligence you think you need to do.
The only thing I did, and this is, of course, didn't have anything to do with my podcast at the time. It was just, I knew I was doing training, and I just sort of named my training company Photography Naples. Well, I realized that was small thinking, because Naples is where I live, is not a very big city. So I went on GoDaddy, and I was typing in domain names, and I came up with understandphotography.com, and I was like,
that's a good one.
Perfect.
That's a great one, actually.
Well,
because it tells you exactly what the benefit is.
Except for everybody adds an ing, which drives me crazy, because it's not understand ing photography, because that domain name I cannot get. The guy wants like $30,000 for it. So it's a dead link. And a lot of people try to find me on his link. But other than that, I got so excited. I'm like, that's perfect. So
yeah,
I just made the show the same name as my company, figuring it was safe. I didn't really I didn't even think of that until just now, actually.
Yeah. Again, for most people, you won't have a problem. So if the URL is available, then I think that's a good sign, usually.
Yeah. And plus, I think, I started putting my name, Peggy Farron, onto things more often, so that I could, if something does happen, hopefully I could carry my customers with me by my name.
Right.
So
Makes
we'll
sense.
see. Okay, so all right, so we're going to come up with our name for our podcast.
And think of the keywords too. And think of keywords that people will be searching for when they're looking for that topic. Understand photography. I want to understand photography. Things that people would be looking for. Those keywords, if you could embed them into your name in some way, then it also helps, again, for search.
All right, and so that's my next question. Okay, so I've got a couple of episodes recorded. I uploaded them, scheduled them, and now how can anybody find me?
Well, you got to go out and tell people you're there. So you've got to promote it, and of course you have your normal channels where you might, one of the things you ought to be doing if you're a photographer or any kind of business owner is collecting emails from all the people who you do business with or who might be interested in you. That's the one thing you ought to be doing before you even start any of this, is start collecting emails. You get a MailChimp or ConvertKit or one of those kinds of services. And you've seen this before. You click on a link and they go, hey, share your name and email. And usually, sometimes they'll do it so you can get a free download, or so you can get a newsletter, or some will say so you can get a discount on the first purchase. But the whole point is you want to get those names and emails and build that list up, because that's where the value is more than anything else. Because when you're ready, you send an email and you turn it on, it becomes math at that point. I have 1,000 people on my list, 20 people respond, 200 people are there. Boom, it's math. It's really simple. And you own that, that asset. And then, of course, you can go out and use social media, and you can, buy ads, or you can do organic, Instagram. Like, where are your customers hanging out? That's where you want to be. The other thing you can do is find other blogs and other podcasts that serve those areas, that market, and try and get a guest host or a guest interviewee, for that audience, because now that introduces you to someone else's audience that might be similar. So that's another way to get out and get in front of people who
like
would
what we're
be
doing
interested
right
in hearing
now.
it. Like what we're doing right now.
Blog and mine at the same time.
Exactly.
Or not blog,
Exactly.
podcast, sorry.
Exactly.
But it's win-win.
Yeah. So right. So I think if you start with those three, and then what you do, sort of like you used to do, Peggy. I don't know if you're still doing it now. Is when you make the episodes like an event. I remember you'd have watch parties for your episodes when they came out, and so that also helps you to generate excitement for it as well.
Yeah, if you don't know what a watch party is, because I didn't, when we stopped doing the live show, I was just sitting there, because I thought, well, I'm going to try to get people to watch the show because it still goes on at 4 o'clock on Friday. And
Okay.
I want to host a watch party on Facebook. And I was like, okay, I didn't know what it was, but it's really helpful. I don't know. Can you do that with a podcast though?
Well, you can do it with anything. I mean, you can.
There's no video.
Oh, I see what you mean. For video podcasts, for an audio, what you do sometimes, what they suggest you do is go Facebook Live to talk about it, and then push the link. So you can have a watch party and say, hey, I just did an episode on 4 ways to make money with your photography and galleries. The link is below. I'll answer any questions you have about it.
Okay.
That kind of thing. I've seen other podcasters do that, either leading into it or after, as a way to supplement.
That's a great idea. And it just kind of notifies. I know, and I don't know how they do it, but some of the podcasts I subscribe to, they send me an email saying, oh, there's a new episode, and they hype up the episode. I usually unsubscribe when they do that, though, not to the podcast, but I don't want the emails usually. But I get 400 emails a day, so I don't need more emails. And for me, they just come up when I'm in the car. I don't really click on anything. That's what happened. I told you that happened to me with your old podcast. I just was driving in the car, and an episode of Shutterbug Life came on, and I was so surprised. But
yeah.
I think so I'm more typical. Don't you think that I'm more typical, where I just whatever comes up in the car?
And it all depends. So some people like to get the email, and I used to hear from clients, like I would, because I have my list, and I would send an email out after everyone. And I remember a couple of times I didn't send an email out, and I actually got clients say, I haven't heard from you in a few weeks. Are you still doing the podcast? And I go, yeah, well, I guess I need to do this more, regularly. So, everyone has their own way they prefer to get information. And so I try to cover all bases.
Yeah. And let me just say, I'm not saying I don't like because if anybody has ever listened to the show, they know my newsletter, my email newsletter is the most important thing in my business. I get more business out of that email newsletter than anything. I send it out once a month.
And if you could leave with one tip, it's if you don't have a list, start it right away, because this is how, like you said, you turn on money. I know that if I have a list with X number of people, and I know what my open rate is, and I know what my click-through rate is, I can now then forecast about how much I can expect to see when I send an email out. And it's all in the numbers at that point. And you can't get that with anyone else, because with Facebook, for a long time there, we had our pages and we were getting a lot of traffic, and then one day Mark said, I'm going to turn that off, and your Facebook pages will no longer get any visibility unless you pay me for it. And boom, that's it. He controls it. And so he can turn it off, the spigot, anytime he decides to. Or like they did on Instagram, we're going to change the algorithms. And so now people who are following you might not see your pictures anymore. You know, they own it. They can do what they want. They're the gatekeepers. So an email list allows you to go directly to people whenever you want to without having to worry about someone else throttling and being gatekeeper for you.
Okay, so what else do we need to talk about with the podcast? What I missed? Because I haven't been looking at the notes that Heather spent so much time working on.
So we talked about the name and the branding, and so when you're setting up your podcast, you'll have to do the name, you'll have to do a subtitle. They'll ask you to choose keywords, so you want to know what keywords you want to rank for, and then you'll do a description, and then more importantly, you'll do an artwork, and it's usually a 3,000 by 3,000 image. And that's the ideal size that Apple likes. So it's a square format. And of course, you want it to be eye-catching. You want it to stand out. You want to look at the other podcasts in the area that you are trying to, stick out in. If they're all, think, how will mine look next to all 8 of those, and how will it stand out? And you want people to look at it, see it at a glance, and go, oh, that's cool. I'm interested in that. So that's the other thing you might want to think about as well as when you're creating a podcast. That art is cool. You can create it yourself on like a Canva.com. That place where you can create your own graphics. And there are a number of other platforms like that where you can go and create your own graphics online, or you can go to 99 Designs or Fiverr and hire someone to do it for you.
That's actually where I got my beginning and my end. That includes the music. And if people have never seen
the spray painter,
it's like a guy spray painting my logo. And so and I think I paid like, I don't remember now, but maybe $50 for that. And it's, what do you call the music you can use?
Yeah, royalty free.
Royalty free music. And then of course he gave me the rights to use his artwork. And I love it. I thought he did a great job. I mean, it's something he does. I'm not the only company who has that, but I like it. So
yeah, I thought it was very nice.
Resource. And Fiverr is FIVERR.com, right?
2 R's at the end. So that, and you bring up a good point too. You can also pay for a voiceover professional to do the intro and outro for your show if you want. It all depends on what you're going for. On my last show, I had my son do it. He was 10 at the time, I think. And so he was still sort of had the cute kid voice, and he did listen to the show for my dad. And I thought, okay, that's cute. And more importantly, I didn't have to pay him. So that's what I cared about. I fed him. So. And then I remember once I wanted to change it, and he was like, my voice has changed now, Dad. This is not going to work anymore. I'm like, yeah, you're probably right.
Oh, yeah, I bet. If he had a deep voice, he probably did not like that little voice.
Yeah, no. I mean, I kept that squeaky voice long past the point where his voice changed because I liked it.
Yeah, well, you're dad.
Right, I know, right? But it's funny because that was one thing that people always talked about when they talked about my podcast. When I bumped into someone, they go, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. We really love your son who does the intro. Which one of your sons is it?" They always wanted to know who he was, and it was kind of a fun thing. People like that because again, it gives a little window into your real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can go to Fiverr now and get a voiceover artist. I got one for my new podcast, since he's outgrown me. And so I got a voiceover artist, and I think I paid like $25. Wow. Fiverr used to be you pay $5 for everything.
Yeah.
Not anymore. Not anymore. It was $25, and I had to keep the word count down, or the price would go up. So
yeah.
Anyway,
that's awesome.
But it's professional, right. So that's what I want.
Okay, so
I think that's about it too.
Yeah. So summarize. Give us like a summary.
A summary is, for a relatively small investment of your time and money, you can have a platform to promote your photography in a way that you can you can really bond and develop trust with your audience, and it makes it much easier to sell when it's time to sell. And I didn't even get into that much, but if I can go back, podcasting is the one platform where you get to spend a lot more time with someone. So you think about it, someone writes a blog. If you write a blog post, they may spend 5 to 10 minutes reading it and they've moved on. Or if you have a video, you've got to stop and dedicate time to video, 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever. Podcast, that you put it in your ear and you can do other things. And so now you have a way to talk to them for 30 to 45 minutes and really connect with them. And it's connects in a way that's intimate and that is long lasting. So it's for a relatively small investment, you can have all that happen for your business.
That's such a great, I forgot to ask you how long it should be.
It depends.
Okay. I mean 60 just because that's all the ones I listen to are about 60. And that was the only reason I chose that money or that number. I didn't really research it a lot, but
if people are interested, they'll listen. If you're interesting, and I have listened to, and I remember the longest episode I listened to was almost 2 hours long. And I would pause it and I'd go to work and come back and continue and listen to the whole thing. And I thought, wow, because I was interested in the topic and the discussion. So
yeah,
just seek to be interesting more so than filling a random time limit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah. And can I share something else, Peggy?
Yes.
So all these things I talked through, I created when I knew I was coming on, I created a checklist that walks you through each one of those steps. If someone wants to start their own podcast, they can just go through and from which microphone to what software to choose to all the things you need to know. All the decisions are in this 5-page free downloadable PDF. And on my website, eosphotographer.com/Peggy, all of your listeners viewers can download it for free.
Oh my,
so,
5 pages?
5, and it's all the things we talked about. If all the things we talked about today were helpful, they're all in that PDF.
Okay.
And it's a checklist. It's not a lot of reading. It's just it's 1, 2, 3, check this, check that, check this, check that, and you go right through, and everything you need should be right there.
Oh man, that's awesome. Thank you for that. Well, then I'm not going to make Heather put all those links in the show notes.
Yeah, the links are also available there. And not only do you have the checklist, but I have a lot of the links as well, so you can go straight to the Amazon store and see what the product is and purchase if you decide.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Clap, clap, clap.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Peggy. This has been great.
Thank you, Lynn. I learned a lot, and I learned that I've been doing a lot of things wrong, or maybe I could be doing better. So I'm going to take a lot out of this interview with Linford Morton. Remember to check our show notes at understandphotography.com. We'll have the show notes and we'll have the links that we talked about, especially the link to the freebie that Lynn is offering. That sounds wonderful. Don't forget the 4 weeks to proficiency in photography begins June 4th. We'll see you then. I'm Peggy Farron. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography Show.
Get up!